You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again with the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we look a little bit farther afield, see what's going on out there in the Bitcoin, the ETH, even the Solana, maybe mix in some other fun stuff. Look at the volume, the volatility, the skew, the OI changes, the hot positions, what's going on out there, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-scintillating network upon which so many of you are binging these days. Reminding you a couple of things. First off, if you're just listening to the Crypto Rundown, man, you are missing out on a whole heck of a lot. So make sure wherever you get this, you upgrade to the full network. You get pretty much close to a dozen shows coming at you, usually a couple a day. And, of course, if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing on your platform of choice. Really just help all the new folks discover the content. And, of course, if you want to explore more, you want to go deeper into these crazy options waters, then theoptionsinsider.com/pro gets you 2 additional exclusive shows, get you access to our great giveaways. Going to give away our Pro Trading Crate pretty soon here for the Pro members for the month of September. So should be fun stuff awaiting there, as well as live access to everything we do here on the network and a whole bunch more. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. Also, the exclusive Pro podcast feed. So if you missed all the great Pro stuff we've been doing for the last year and change over there, it's all available for you there. You can put it pretty much wherever you get your podcast right now. So it's a pretty cool thing. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. Let's see who's joining us on the old program today to help us navigate these stormy crypto seas. I'm pleased to welcome back our old friend, Mr. Bill Ulivieri, the founder over there at Cenacle Capital Management. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program. There you are.
I heard a little break, but I'm here, and I didn't get any error messages, so I think we're good.
You're good. All right, then. With the team assembled, we're going to dive right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the world's leading digital asset. Of course, we're talking about the big boy, which is Bitcoin, looking a little bit bigger this week than it was this time last week. Not a ton, but For the bulls, I'm sure they'll take it out there. Last week on our show, we were pretty much at exactly 19,100 in Bitcoin. And this week, about 19,585. So up a whopping 484 handles over the course of the past week. Of course, we had a wider range outside of our shows, including to the dark side. The lowest we hit in the intervening period was last Wednesday, about 18,649. And to the upside, we got north of the 20K level again, that auspicious 20,000 level, 2279. It's actually had a pretty decent range this week coming into the start of the show. Mr. Bill, we will start there, sir. What is catching your eye out there in the big dog that is Bitcoin this week?
And well, in Bitcoin, it still is my favorite token. It still remains to be the big dog, the big elephant and gorilla in the room. Its technicals, I think, actually are looking pretty decent in terms of the fact that we made that low back, during June of 2022. I think it was like June 13th. All cryptos really made a big low. Bitcoin made a low around 17,697, roughly down there, and now it's trading, high 1900s, almost 20,000. So I find it really interesting that this sense of divergence where Bitcoin has not made a new low, but the equities, as have gotten crushed since June. And so I kind of like the way things are looking. I'm not going to lie to you. And so there's a few things setting up that, we'll get into and we'll talk about. But right now I am optimistic that Bitcoin has put in the bottom, because Lord knows, we threw a lot of babies out with the bathwater in the last 6 weeks with the market. And yet many of these cryptocurrencies have not made a new low. And I find that divergence very interesting.
Yeah, that has been fascinating for me to watch as well, because you're right. I kept expecting when the broad markets were just getting annihilated over the course of the past couple of weeks that Bitcoin would follow suit. And we did see it dip, but obviously it didn't have the continued protracted downside that we saw, which everyone has kind of come to assume now. Everyone's just assuming that Bitcoin, as many of our guests have termed it, is just a high beta tech allocation right now. And when you have a high beta tech allocation, it's going to be swinging wildly with the market. And yet kind of haven't seen that, which has been interesting, at least the last couple of weeks. So, Bill, it sounds like you're as surprised as perhaps I am that Bitcoin hasn't played its high beta tech role of late.
Right. And actually I have one of my clients that it took him about 5 years to get on board with Bitcoin. And so he has purchased a pretty good sized position, concerning of his net worth. And he was actually thanking me, saying, Bill, the Bitcoin is kind of unchanged to up from where I bought it, but my other portfolio of stocks and pharmaceuticals and stuff have gotten killed. So I never that Bitcoin actually provided this kind of safe haven is what you were saying. And he was being a little tongue in cheek. I mean, a little bit, but for the most part, his account with crypto is actually hanging in there. I also find it really interesting that with as much negative news that we've had from the political front, from the White House, cryptocurrency bills, making proof of work illegal, Bitcoin mining, like all this huge ramp up in dialogue and in conversation, yet we haven't made a new low since June. I find that interesting. I like those kind of paradoxes.
Are you down with that, listeners? You think we have put the bottom in? That might be a fun question of the week to explore, maybe a flash poll during our crypto rundown one of these days. Have you put in the bottom in Bitcoin? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts out there. Listen, there you go, Bill. Bitcoin is finally serving the purpose that all asset managers wanted from it years ago. It's finally being this, I won't call it uncorrelated, but less correlated asset class. How about that?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I think it's really interesting. Yes, it's failed to live up to its concept of the new gold, right, and the digital gold. But it's down more than gold has this year, but gold hasn't exactly lived up to its inflationary promises either, right? Keeping up with inflation. So it's still a risk on asset. And I just think things have really, I don't know, sometimes things get more clouded and then other things seem to sharpen and focus. And I think that's kind of where we're at now with Bitcoin and bonds, right? Fixed income is a flight to quality. We've only seen the US dollar be the true flight to quality safe haven. It wasn't bonds. It wasn't short-term bonds. It wasn't crypto. It wasn't, any of the things that we traditionally went to. So I find it really interesting that, the old standbys for asset managers like myself who rely on the 60-40, 70-30, 80-20 kind of mixture, that, going to high yield and not high yield, but even treasuries, didn't quite play out like we expected. So it's interesting. This is the fun part of trying to figure out like the next new thing.
Yes, nothing really performing like people expected this year. It's been definitely a topsy-turvy year from that perspective. Let's see what's going on out there in the realm of Bitcoin vol. Of course, you can find these analytics for yourselves over there at Genesis Volatility. Listeners, gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the proverbial fires out there. If you did that, you would see that Bitcoin vol hanging out lower again this week, in spite of the range we had over the course of the past week. Bitcoin vol a little bit short of 64, about 63.70 coming into the start of the show. That's down from a 69 on our show last week. So it continues to erode, which you've been listening to this show for a little while, is pretty much par for the course for Bitcoin vol. It can spike, but unless something happens to really maintain it, it will continue to erode. BitVol, our friend Mr. Simon Ho's metric, his kind of 30-day rolling measurement of Bitcoin, effectively a Bitcoin VIX, Bitcoin vol out there. It's about a 70, which is down a little bit. It was a 70 and a half on the show this time last week. That one down a little bit as well. In terms of a skew, what's going on from a skew perspective? Things were looking decidedly negative last week, negative 6.5. That has been cut almost in half, about a negative 3.6. So still negative, but not quite as negative as it was this time last week. And we're seeing pretty much the same thing with Simon's bit skew number. That's a little bit of a different number. Obviously, he's looking out 30 days and trying to encapsulate all of that in one number. That actually is looking a little bit richer, which is interesting. 100.4 versus 99.25 on the show this time last week. But the interesting evolution we've seen out there, listeners, in terms of options across all the products this week really has been September rolling off the board since our last show. That has shaken things up a little bit out there. So let's dive into what some of those changes are right now, including the OI. How much OI is open right now on Deribit in terms of Bitcoin options? And the answer this week is less than there was this time last week. You got 148,000 calls open. That's down 22,000 from this time last week, and 79,000 puts, down 18,000. So both pretty much down close to 1-to-1s. We're still hanging out at pretty much 2-to-1 calls over puts, but we're seeing OI come rolling off the board. Let's see what impact that's had from an overall top positions perspective. And you know what? This is one of the bigger shakeups we've seen in a little while out here in terms of the top positions. What is open for size right now in the options over there in Deribit? Let's find out. Number 5, 25,000 strike. That's number 5. That has about 10,100 contracts. That's open. That's down 4,500 from this time last week. So September taking a lot of paper with it. I mean, a whole bunch of newcomers popping in this week too. So the loss of September really changing things up. Number 4 is the 15,000 strike. Haven't seen that one in there. Now that's a newcomer. That's got 10,800 contracts open. Number 3, we have the 21,000 strike. That has 11,500 contracts open. Also a newcomer this week. And number 2, we have the 19,000 strike. That has 12,200 contracts open. That's also a newcomer. And the number 1 size position in Bitcoin options right now on Deribit, the 20,000 strike, that has 13,500 contracts open. That's down 100. So some of the big changes, obviously, we've seen a whole bunch of newcomers in the middle there. And then the number 1 position that has been at the top of our list for pretty much months, the 25,000 strike, that has been kicked down all the way to the bottom of our top 5 now. So interesting evolution out there. And in terms of action, how much action did we see over the course of the past week? Well, the busiest day was last Wednesday. Remember, that was the day also we were dipping back into the 18,000 level on Bitcoin, listeners. We saw about 44,500 contracts changing hands out there that week. Mr. Bill, I know you don't follow the options too closely day in, day out, but any of this come as a bit of a surprise to you? In fact, that September rolling off the board and really kind of shaking things up out there in the options front this week, sir.
No, not really, Mark. I mean, honestly, I don't spend a lot of time looking at the Bitcoin volatility. I find I kind of, maybe to a fault, group Bitcoin in as a regular asset class. So I spent more time looking at the VIX indicator, which really hasn't made a new high since roughly 2021. I mean, this huge sell-off that we received in the market, volatility didn't really spike that much like I expected. And even the skew, the CBOE skew index, the symbol is SKEW. I find that also really interesting. Like the market was just getting annihilated and it didn't really seem, there was sort of a complacency in the relationship between calls and puts. Once again, as an asset manager, trying to figure out where was a safe haven. Was it buying put options as protection? I'm not so sure we saw that skew take off and get steep on the way down, right? So just some really interesting divergences, like all over the place. And so I was probably more not entranced and not hypnotized, but just in awe of how things didn't really protect and play out the way we traders and managers and investors expected things to play out this year. And so I really, that to me was like a bigger story. So I'm still trying to process all that, but here we have, again, you expect that when you buy downside puts as a protection against, a futures position or a stock portfolio position, you might have gotten the price increase, as the market declined, but you didn't get that flight to quality fear. Oh my gosh, I need to buy a downside put at any cost kind of mentality, right? We didn't see it in the skew number. So I don't know. I think that's really interesting. And maybe this was not a big biblical decline as we all are thinking about it. Like there's maybe a little bit more calm and more ease and more, not as much fear as we expected. And does that mean that the bottom's in and we're going to be off to the races like a typical midterm election? Or does it mean that the other shoe hasn't dropped yet? So that's kind of the big question. But I think that, again, Bitcoin has held up really well, as did, volatility didn't really go anywhere from my perspective, though. I don't know what you think.
I like that. You were hypnotized by Bitcoin, Bill.
Well,
lulled into its trance, sir.
Yes.
The hypnotic powers of Bitcoin. Are you too hypnotized by Bitcoin or crypto, listeners? Hit us up. Let us know. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the hypnotic powers of all things Bitcoin. Let's get out to the CME products, see what's trading it up out there. Not a heck of a lot on the tape this week, but again, it's kind of early goings here for the trading week. Last week on the big Bitcoin options, we saw 678, not a ton, but then again, this is a pretty beefy contract. We've been saying this since launch. This is kind of only for the big institutions out there. So seeing anything even approaching 1,000 is pretty decent paper. The micro Bitcoin options doing 1,928 contracts over there at CME last week. So something. It's, again, the micro ones, for whatever reason, have had a hard time taking off. Maybe that's because so many of you are using Bito instead. Bito seems to be the popular one. In fact, we had more people asking about it again last week, asking if we could include it in the show. So we thought we'd give you a little bit of a tip of the cap out there, throw a little bit of Bito at you this week. Bito coming into the start of the show. Let's see. Let's get a live quote on good old Bito right now. Bito at 12:01. Up a whopping 2 cents. Is that hypnotic? I don't know. I'll leave that to you to decide. It has rallied from this morning. It was down about 11.75 this morning. So it's up about 25 cents net on the day. The vol out there in Bito, pretty similar to what we're talking about over there on the Deribit options as well. We had about a 68 right now. And in terms of the top positions, what are the top 5 positions out there in Bito options right now? Well, let's find out. By the way, listeners, if you're wondering what is the ADV out there in Bito, it's 83,000. So it's putting up some numbers. That could certainly be one of the reasons why the micro Bitcoin contracts over there at CME haven't really taken hold, because you guys have an easy option that actually performs fairly well in a securities account. I know that's attractive to a lot of you out there. Top 5 positions in Bito options right now. Number 5, we have the 12,000 of the October 10 puts. Number 4, we got 17,000 of the October. These are in the weeklies, expiring on the 7th. So this week, listeners, 10 puts. So a lot of action on the 10 strike out there. Number 3, 28,000 of the D's 15 calls. Number 2, 28,000 as well of the D's 10 puts. These are end of year. Those are expiring on the 30th. And then number 1 position in Bito right now, we have the D's 10 puts, the regular monthly, also 35,000 of those. So that's the hot strike out there, the 10 put strike out there. Let's see, by the way, how low did Bito get over the big sell-off? Let's see. We got as low as about 1137. So not that far below where we are right now. So folks drawing some lines in the sand on the 10 strike. Interesting. And Mr. Bill, I know you've paid cautious attention to Bito. I think we've been slowly luring you to the dark side of that one out there. You have any thoughts on Bito? Have you been paying attention to it since our last show, sir?
Yeah, I mean, definitely have opened up my mind, and thank you for that, Mark. Again, I was focusing on the people that brought us to the dance, which was the Grayscale investment trusts, and they're still trading, way under net asset value, maybe still about 32, 33%. And so, it has opened my eyes to the possibilities of allocating, especially right now. Like this probably would be a great time to do some tax loss harvesting. And so to potentially sell I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but I'm just saying that the potential now there is to sell, say, GBTC and buy Bito, or sell GBTC and buy, some other products, even though you're giving up, the net asset value discount. It's just something to look at. And I need to talk to another tax guy to make sure that actually makes sense. But let me tell you, those open interest numbers that you brought up, Mark, I mean, those are attractive numbers. I mean, GLD, the gold ETF, their open interest is like 13,500 in their back month, Jan 2023 options. Their December options, maybe 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 across all, maybe 20,000 across all products. It's so, these numbers in Bito open interest, I mean, these are very respectable. And this is interesting. I like big open interest numbers, and I cannot lie.
You cannot lie. As you're looking, I was just looking at some of the downside puts. I may be talking myself into a 1x2 put spread here later on in Bito, Bill. We'll see as we keep on rolling. But now it's time to head on out of all things Bitcoin and into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
12, 11, put 1x2s up there for credits. Always attractive. I may be talking myself into a trade, but we'll get into that later. Let's get into now what's lighting it up out here in terms of the altcoin universe. You want to find out if I do that trade, listeners, join us on Options Oddities later on the pro side this week, where we talk ourselves into all sorts of fun, crazy trades on that program. Let's see what's fun and crazy right now in the world of altcoin. We'll start in the top 10 listeners out there. And once again, Dogecoin maintaining its death grip on that number 10 spot, hanging out there with just a tick over 8 billion worth of market cap. Number 9 is Solana, 11.8 billion worth of market cap. This one stubbornly refusing to break the 30 handle, as Bill was talking about, that lack of true aggressive correlation out there. Bitcoin refusing to get crazy low beyond the 18.6 or so range. Solana, same thing, kept bouncing off that 30 handle, which is interesting to watch. Cardano coming into showtime, about 14.6 billion for number 8. Number 7, Binance USD, 21 billion. Number 6, our old friend XRP, 22.8 billion. A lot of folks looking forward to perhaps some sort of resolution in that one way or the other. I saw somewhere Ripple folks, so they spent like $100 million on that case, which if that's the case, that's just insane. But either way, that's where we are right now. Number 5, we've got BNB, 46.5 billion worth of market cap. So once again, a huge jump up between number 6 and number 5, roughly 24 billion. Number 4, USD coin, 47 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, 67, almost 68 billion. Numero 2, we've got ETH, 162 billion. And number 1, the big dog, looking a little bit bigger this week, 375 billion for Bitcoin. Let's get on out to the number 2 listeners, even though I know it's number 1 in a lot of your hearts. That is ETH. Coming into the start of the show was at a 1322. Last week was at a whopping 1324. So we're down a whopping 2.6 handles on the week, listeners. Can you handle that action? Can you handle that price volatility? We actually did see a little bit more of a range outside of our shows, obviously. We got as low as about 1273. That was also back last Wednesday. That was kind of the near-term nadir for a lot of the major crypto assets. And the high was right after our show last week on the 27th, Tuesday, 1392. So been kind of hanging out in this roughly 120-point range for the better part of the last week, which is probably why our vol is kind of continuing to erode. Last week we were at 86.25. This week 81.5. So still frothy, still juicier than Bitcoin, obviously, which is where ETH vol usually trades in relation to Bitcoin, but still continuing to come in. Mr. Bill, anything catching your eye out there this week in the number 2 crypto asset, even though I know it's number 1 in a lot of our listeners' hearts? It is ETH, sir.
Same thing with Ethereum. Again, I find the chart pattern really interesting. It didn't really seem to extend down, in the decline, kind of held in there, kind of like Bitcoin did. It seemed to have gone through the merge, which was from the proof of work to proof of stake, which was successful. I mean, we were all I'm not going to say we were all, but I'm saying there were some people that were very concerned that the whole infrastructure just might melt down and we would have another massive car accident and pile up in Ethereum, and that didn't happen. So I'm pretty excited. The concept of Ethereum as a global operating system and as a way to move in the Web 3.0, I'm super excited about. And honestly, this Ethereum is the same thing with Bitcoin. Is that in terms of its technicals, it has held in there pretty good. Maybe it traded down to the low of its 10-week moving average, but overall it's kind of fair value here. Maybe it's still a little bit oversold, but again, not that type of washing out. Like we saw that in June. We didn't really get that today, now, and I like that. That shows strength to me, technical strength.
And we had some guests recently come on after the ETH merge and kind of call it a bit of a non-event. Everyone was building up to this thing, and there was some people thought they were a little underwhelmed as to what we saw as a result. I'm curious, what were your thoughts on the big ETH merge? Was it, as a lot of our guests have put it, a non-event to you, or did you find something interesting going on out there?
Well, I wouldn't call it a non-event. I would say it's rather, I find it exciting. I mean, I love proof of work as a consensus. For me, that's distributed, it's even, it's fair, it's not centralized. And I find that aspect absolutely, again, enticing and hypnotic. At the same time, I do understand that we have to be real and we need proof of stake kind of products in order to move Web 3.0 forward. And so for me, it wasn't so much the technicals that were I found interesting. The fact that it still traded down to its 10-week moving average at around $1,000 a token and bounced back up again. We're kind of a little bit below mid-range on its technicals. But again, what I think I found interesting was this: for a cryptocurrency that did a massive upgrade, very slow, right? I remember when I was working for a proprietary trading firm, we would always make sure that we would firmly grasp the upgrade, right? And it was working fine before we let go of the previous version. So it was a very prudent thing to do. It was like the way you had to move forward. You couldn't let go of what you had before you knew that the thing that you had in your hand was working. And so I really do appreciate the developers and the foundation and the team that did that. And now I'm probably more excited about Ethereum. I am more excited about cryptocurrency. I'm more excited about Web 3.0 than I've ever been. And we really, in some way, have ushered in a new era of decentralized, quote unquote, decentralized, blockchain solutions, Web 3.0. And this is incredibly exciting from a fundamental perspective, Mark. You can't have Ethereum take off when the gas fees to mint NFTs are $30 per project or $100 per project, or this pool of transactions was just exploding in size and cost. No, that's not going to work. So I think this is really interesting. For me, it's kind of like when the S&P 500 future flipped to an ETF, the SPY, back in like the early 90s. It was like this really interesting and great change in the evolution of something, right? So we kind of went from futures contracts to ETFs with the move from S&P 500 and SPX and SPOOs to SPY, the ETF, in the early 90s, I think it was, maybe 92 or 93. And so that's, to me, like greater adoption, lower cost. The move from futures contracts to ETFs, or the move from mutual funds to ETFs, more transparent, cheaper, better, different structure. Like, that's kind of how I look at things. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that I think that the fundamental merge was a good thing for Ethereum.
Definitely in the long run, it certainly is interesting. I think people were hoping for maybe a little bit more of a trading event around it. Traders, Bill, they always want the volume and the spikes and everything else. And from that perspective, maybe a little bit underwhelming. But you're right. So from the long-term prospects of this, and certainly for the environment and everything else, it's been a benefit going forward. Let's see what's going on out here right now in all things ETH options. Skew-wise, again, kind of following a similar trajectory to Bitcoin. Last week it was very negative, -9.25. This week, still negative, but only -6.8. So still looking firmly negative, but perhaps not quite as negative as last week. OI, same deal. We saw pretty much 1 million contracts come off the board since our last show, as September rolled off the board and took a lot of OI with it. It's still pretty much mostly calls all the time, but it has come in quite a bit. This week, I should say, the calls are down 825,000 contracts on Deribit. There's 3.18 million calls open versus the puts, 719,000 contracts. Those are down 233,000. So a substantial loss of OI out there. We're still hanging out around that 4-to-1 calls over put. So it's still pretty much calls all the time out there in ETH, but down precipitously from what it was this time last week. Let's see if we have a similar shakeup to the top 5 positions that we saw in Bitcoin. We'll start at the bottom again. Number 5 is a newcomer, the 1600 strike. So surprising it took us this long to get the 1600 in there. We've been vacillating around that level for quite some time, if not below it. So 1600 finally making its way in there at number 5 this week with 139,000 contracts open. Again, that is a newcomer this week. The rest look like they're all holdovers from last week. Number 4, we have the 2500 strike. 206,000 contracts open there. That's down 67,000 contracts from this time last week. So you can just see how much September took off each of these. Number 3, we have the 3,500 strike. So looking pretty optimistic, looking pretty far up there. 290,000 open there. That's down 59,000. So a lot of paper coming off with September there. Number 2, the 4,000 strike. 322,000 contracts open. That's down 89,000. And our number 1 position remains the 3,000 strike. That has still been just fascinating. I know for a lot of you out there, we've seen a lot of paper, particularly in December. But obviously there was a lot open in September as well, because there's 416,000 contracts left on that strike. That's down 46,000 from this time last week. So September taking a lot of, let's say, vestigial upside paper with it. We'll see what happens going forward. Not as much of a shakeup in the OI as we saw in Bitcoin, obviously. The big day for ETH options over the past week actually wasn't Wednesday. It was actually the 30th. So that's kind of interesting. So last Friday, 412,000 contracts. That is a little bit less than our previous show, where the big day was the 19th with 612,000. So that's 200,000 contracts less. So that puts that in perspective. It was a pretty steady week. We saw multiple days at or around that level, listeners, but it wasn't the one big explosive day of volume like we saw in the previous weeks. Let's get on out to CME land, see what's going on. Remember, the big ETH options launched not quite a month ago, September 12th over there at CME. So they're still trying to get their feet under them. If you guys want to see reports on the CME options, head on over to cmegroup.com. Then go to /TWIFO, TWIFO. That stands for This Week in Futures Options. That is the show that we do with them every week, where I have mentioned in the past on this show. You should be checking out that one as well if you're listening to the Crypto Rundown. It's the only other show we really get into crypto in any meaningful capacity on the network. And you can see there, if you go to that special cryptocurrencies section of that report, what's going on. You see those micro options I was talking about earlier for the micro Bitcoin and micro ETH. And you can see the same thing for the big ETH. The big Ether options still kind of struggling to find their footing. It's not a ton of paper last week. Micro ETH options, we saw 7,600 contracts going up last week. So that's not a bad week, all things considered. It's not as active. We've seen more active weeks out there for micro ETH. And if you listen to our TWIFO program, you've heard us say also, it's interesting staccato rhythm to the paper out there. Some days it trades up a ton, then it'll sit at not much volume for a couple of days, then it'll trade again. So it's very interesting. In terms of the most active contract out there, this makes sense. It was the 13.5 calls doing 1,772 contracts. Those are out in the November timeframe out there. So November, 13.5 calls doing nearly 2,000 contracts. That was the big dog out there on the CME micro ETH options last week. And you guys have asked for it, so we shall deliver. We shall talk about Solana, the most recent addition to the show, along with Bito. Mr. Bill, I don't think you and I have ever had an in-depth heart-to-heart on Solana. What are your thoughts on all things Solana, sir?
Well, Solana, the way I understand it, Mark, in that it was, again, it seeks to be, to leapfrog over Ethereum, as like a Web 3.0 type of project. I'm pulling up the chart right now. I think these tokens, they get a following, they get a name, and that tends to cause a little pumpy dumpy kind of perspective. We saw that in Solana, we saw that in Chainlink, we see it every once. We saw it in Doge and Shibu, right, where you get these tokens that just, maybe it's just a cool name. I'm not really sure. I don't know exactly what does it, but again, I'm pretty agnostic as to the actual token. You know what? All things considering, the high was $185, almost $200 a token at the peak FOMO of Solana. Now it cratered down to what's it trading about 30, maybe $28 to $31 a token. Again, a great launch, a good protocol. I'm not a developer, so I can't dig into the actual product like the developers can. People who are tech heavy. I'm looking at the technical side. And I find its pattern, kind of interesting. And, it suffered along with the other, tokens in the decline. But from what I hear, what Solana is trying to accomplish, I think that they've got a good reputation and will probably, be one of the ones that we'll look back and talk about this in a year or two, and we'll realize that Solana was probably a good buy down here.
Yeah, we have been keeping an eye on it. It has stubbornly maintained its level north of 30 in spite of what's been going on out there with the rest of the big crypto. And coming into the show this week, it's pretty much unched on the week. Last show was 33.39. This week, 33.12. So down slightly, but still not a huge move out there on the week. In terms of vol, it's been following the pattern of the other major crypto assets out there, which is slowly eroding. Last week, it was a little bit shy of 92 vol, so 91.85. So you're kind of seeing an interesting pattern here, listeners. Bitcoin in terms of vol, then ETH, which is usually frothier than Bitcoin, and now Solana, obviously above ETH in terms of a little bit frothier, a little bit more volatile asset than ETH itself. This week, an 84.40, so obviously coming in like the rest of our crypto assets from a vol perspective. Skew-wise, again, following a similar trajectory. Last week, predominantly negative, almost -9, -8.75. This week, about a -4, a little bit north of 4, about -4.1 or so out there. Remember, listeners, that's taking the vol of effectively your call wing and the vol of your put wing and subtracting them. And so if it's going to be negative, that means there's more vol to be found in the puts, which is kind of the way cryptos are trading right now. Hence that put fly I was talking about earlier in Bito. Things are looking juicy to the downside. In terms of open interest, again, just a ton of paper coming off the board with September. We haven't been following Solana that long, so we don't know if this is par for the course or what. I guess we'll find out going forward. I mean, I know when we had Greg on the show not too long ago, he said he was a little disappointed with the OI and Solana options. He was hoping for a little bit more. So we'll pay attention to see how things evolve out here. Right now, in terms of the size OI, 132,000 contracts on the call front. That's down 180,000 from this time last week, listeners. And the puts, 411,000, down 195,000. You could see it still is maintaining that almost 4-to-1 puts over calls level that Solana has been hanging out there. So that's also kind of fascinating and a market difference from the other major crypto assets we talk about here on the show, which is, as you can see, Bitcoin is 2-to-1 calls over puts. ETH is 4-to-1 calls over puts. We're going almost completely the other way, nearly 4-to-1 puts over calls in Solana. So intriguing stuff to be found out here. Let's see what's going on from a top positions perspective. Again, we got a little bit of shakeup going on out here as well. Number 5 is the 40 strike that has 37,000 contracts open. That is a newcomer this week. Number 4, the 29 strike. So 51,000 contracts open there. Also a newcomer. Remember I said we're hanging out at about a 33 right now, listeners. Number 3, the 26 strike has 56,000 contracts open. Again, that is a newcomer. So the bottom half of our top 5 is pretty much all newcomers. And then number 2, we have the 32 strike that has 95,000 contracts open. That's up 25,000. So some folks piling back into the 32 strike this week. And the number 1 size position in Solana options is the 28 strike, has 103,000 contracts open. That is down 28,000 from this time last week. And as we can see from the OI and looking at the charts, that is pretty much all put paper, listeners. So 103,000 puts open on the 28 strike in Solana right now. And in terms of activity, the biggest day for Solana, like ETH, interestingly enough, wasn't Wednesday. It was Friday with 237,000 contracts on the tape. So far, that is the most active day we have seen. But again, we've only been monitoring Solana options for a few weeks here. So we'll see how things shape up. Mr. Bill, before we roll on out of the altcoin universe, I know you're always paying attention to some fun altcoin that maybe we're not talking about here on the show. So any other interesting altcoin making it on your radar this week, sir?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Mark, this is going to, I know as a financial advisor, we have to, when we talk to our clients, we have to do this KYC, know your client, and anti-money laundering rules. But we have a rule, an SEC rule, where we really have to make sure that we do a good job of understanding the risk tolerances and how much money a client is willing to put onto the table, whether it's S&P 500 or Russell 2000, QQQ, right? And so I have to be careful how I invest the portfolio. But so what I'm about to say is not financial advice. It's just a personal opinion. And I look at my distribution of tokens and ETFs. I find it fascinating that SPY, QQQ, IWM, TLT, the 20-year Barclays ETF, are all more oversold than Dogecoin, Shibu, EOS, Litecoin, and Coinbase and like all these other tokens. I find the relationship between crypto holding up quite well versus our traditional ETFs. And so this is where I'm going with this, Mark. I looked at it about 150 charts this morning before I came on the radio with you. And listen, Stellar Lumen, XLM, not a new low. Chileas, not CHZ, not a new low. Polymath, Coinbase, Cardano, not a new low. I mean, I would say that for every 10 charts I looked at, there was barely one chart that had made a true new low. And I look at this clock cleaning that the markets received in in 2022 year to date. Yet these tokens that we're looking at, the crazy thing, the conversations, the White House, everything being anti-crypto. Gary Gensler is identifying all these tokens as securities. Yet the vast majority of these have not made a new low from the 2019 bear market, from the 2017 crypto winter, 2019 bear. I find that absolutely fascinating. And so when you ask me the question, are there any new interesting altcoins on my radar? Yes, all of them. Like everything that's available on Coinbase, I find really interesting right now. I don't care what kind of, token it is. I mean, they all look really interesting. Higher lows, higher lows, higher lows. It did it 3 times. Like I think crypto winter is just about over. And look at today's rally in technology. I mean, market's up huge today. So I'm just saying things look really interesting to me. And there's no token. It'd be hard for me to decline any interest in any token. All the ones that were the favorite child that are now taken out to the woodshed for a beating, I think look really interesting. I mean, I'm just from a technical standpoint.
Take us back to that hypnotic effect you were talking about earlier. You fire up Coinbase, Bill, and you're just hypnotized. You want to buy it all.
I'm sorry. Yes.
I'll take 1 of those and 10 of those and 100 of those. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I can certainly see how you would feel that way. Listeners, are you hypnotized? You wanted to start loading up on all these assets? Hit us up. Let us know as we go through the rest of our altcoin, and we'll get some questions and get out of here for this week. Ripple, like I said, this one's making a lot of headlines. No concrete news, but a lot of speculation. Ripple wants it to end. The SEC wants it to end. Everyone wants it to end one way or the other. It seems like the judge is the only one who doesn't want it to end yet. So that's what everyone's waiting for out there. It's down a little bit this week. It was 47.60 last week, 45.70 this week. So down almost 2 cents on the week, but still up over the last couple of weeks as these rumors have persisted that there will be some resolution. Good old Doge, it was pretty much unched on the week. Litecoin actually getting a little bit of a lift, almost 53 on the show last week, 53.79 this week, so up about 80 cents on the week. And Cardano, 44.5 last week, 42.70 this week, down almost 2 cents on the week. And Polkadot, $6.50 last week, 6.33 this week, down a whopping almost 20 cents on the week. And everyone's favorite, Shiba. Alas, Shiba Lambo updates. No Lambos on the docket this week because Shiba is unched. As we keep on rolling, head on into some of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to your crypto questions. I'm just chuckling at this question from Options Queen here. Of course you would ask this one, Options Queen. She says, did you see that Kim Kardashian was fined by the SEC for promoting crypto? I did see that headline coming across right as we were starting the show. I didn't get a chance to dip into it, but she also kindly included a link. Oh, that Gary Gensler actually retweeted. So apparently Gensler is proud of this one. That sounds like him. He says, we announced charges today against Kim Kardashian for promoting a crypto security offered by Ethereum Max without disclosing the payment she received for the promotion. She agreed to settle the charges, paid $1.26 million, and cooperate with the investigation. That doesn't surprise me. These quote-unquote influencers, they operate in a very unregulated environment, right? They get paid to do tweets. They get paid to do posts on Instagram and post YouTube videos. And they're used to just taking money and promoting things and not disclosing anything. I know YouTube has tried to crack down on this a little bit, but the SEC, they play by very different rules of engagement. If you do that, in their neck of the woods, they're going to come down on you. And sounds like they did with Kim Kardashian. I'm glad they're doing this. There's so many people out there just pumping these things without disclosing any sort of stake that they have in these things. So I'm glad to see it. Clearly, Gary Gensler is glad, Bill. So they're trumpeting their, and she's paying a decent amount, $1.26 million, which makes you wonder how much did they pay her if she's paying a fine of $1.26 million, Bill.
I heard that she received like $250,000 for a payment. She was fined 1.26. So say she's out $1 million, right? On top of her $1.2 billion net worth, like,
she can swing it, I think. Yeah.
There's no other villains out there. I don't know. It seems I get it, and then there's got to be worse offenders out there. I don't know.
Clearly, they're proud of this one. They're tweeting it from the rafters on this one. Look, we got Kim Kardashian. So there we go. Here's a fun one for you, Bill. A little bit off topic, but when you're not talking to me about all things crypto, you do dabble in your day job as an asset manager. So you are looking at other assets outside of crypto. And we've got Nichols in our live chat. He wants to know, what does Bill think about the bounce in the market today? And what are his thoughts on these market levels? A bit of an off-topic question. You know what, Nichols? We'll allow it because we're nice folks here. Mr. Bill, when you're not looking at all things crypto, which you mentioned, you were surprised at its resilience. And maybe you think the crypto winter is done. We are obviously bouncing in the broad markets today. We were up over almost closing in on 3%. Not too long ago out there. What are your thoughts? Nichols wants to know on this bounce and in general, what we've been seeing in the market over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so I'll go through this as quickly as I can. If you look at the American Association of Individual Investors, the AAII bullish sentiment is at 19.95. This is as low as it was in the 2005 decline. It got down to 20% in the 2007 to 2009 bear market. It's as low as it was in 2009, 2011, 2016, 2018, probably even lower than it was lower than the COVID decline in March of 2020. But when you look at bearish sentiment that's out there, we're almost at all-time highs, which is really interesting. When you look at interest rates, you look at the fact that the long-term TLTs and other bonds have kind of reached their target, right? I mean, you have the 10-year notes reached 4% and then sold off huge. We have the U.S. dollar on a multi-year run, and usually when the U.S. dollar goes up, our equity markets go down. And so, from my perspective, I think that it's really interesting that investor sentiment's at an all-time low, lower than other bear market areas. We have a huge market washout, high money market positions. I am very, very, very bullish here for the short term and the intermediate term. I think we had a lot of things at play. Midterm elections, higher interest rates. Coming off the liquidity that the Federal Reserve and other institutions provided. We have this Russia, Ukraine conflict. There's like a lot of stuff that caused this market to get crushed. And I'm a contrarian, right? But my gosh, the U.S. dollar is as high as it was back in, it's almost like a 20-year high practically. So for me, I think that things look incredibly positive for the next couple of years. I'm very encouraged at today's rally. And again, Mark, this is the question. Every economic cycle has four parts: expansion, peak, contraction, and trough, or like consolidation. Clearly, we're not in expansion. Clearly, we peaked, last year. Clearly, we've been in a decline with the S&P and the QQQs down 28 to 30 some percent this year. So the question is, are we done contracting and in consolidation? I think we're there. Because why? 10-year rates reached 4%. That's kind of like the target that all the federal governors had said, maybe 4.5 best. All commodities, natural gas, crude oil, lumber, commodities, corn, wheat, beans, high-grade copper, nickel. I mean, name them all. They're all down substantially from their quote-unquote inflationary high. So I think inflation has been slayed. We just don't know it yet. And this market is like this beach ball underwater. And if we close unchanged on the year in 2022, I wouldn't be surprised. This is just I'm really like this contrarian play here. I think we're kind of in a slingshot. That's okay. That's my and I'm leaning the portfolios that way. I've been very aggressive. I think with some of our clients that want to be aggressive.
Mr. Bill, stop holding back. Tell us how you really think, sir.
I know, right? That was the perfect question to ask me because I'm wound up with this.
You are.
I'm hypnotized.
You're hypnotized, baby. You're hypnotized by the broad markets as well. Mr. Bill.
I am. I'm so bullish here. I can't even.
Hypnotized. Interesting, listeners. Are you down with that hypnotism? Are you buying what he's selling? Hit us up. Let us know. I'm curious. In our poll last week, Bill, we just did a poll with our audience, and we asked them, are you buying in at these levels? Are you waiting for lower levels? And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but something along the orders of 2/3 said they're waiting for lower levels. And when we posted that, we were at about 36.60, so a little bit below where we are right now. So intriguing. A lot of that goes back to that bearish sentiment you were talking about earlier. So intriguing stuff. Our question for the week this week, listeners, if you get on over there to @options, make your voice heard. Not a crypto question this week, but an intriguing one nonetheless. Along those same lines of overall valuation, correlated to that, of course, is volatility or VIX. We're asking you this week, you said back in May, we did a poll back in May, and 43% of you said that we need VIX to pop over 40 to signal that the worst is behind us, that there's a concession in the broad market. So we're revisiting that now, see if you guys still feel that way. Quite simply, what level does VIX need to hit to signal the bottom, quote unquote, in the market? I gave you 4 choices: VIX north of 40, VIX north of 50, VIX north of 60, or you don't buy into that theory at all. You think no VIX spike is needed to signal a bottom in the market. Sounds that's where Mr. Bill is hanging out. @options is the place to go to make your voice heard, listeners. And Mr. Bill, if folks want to reach out to you to discuss any of these topics, they want to join in your mass hypnosis for the crypto space, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, you can contact us at area code 847-686-4800. That's 847-686-4800. I mean, I know that many of your listeners are probably do-it-yourselfers and self-manager accounts, but we are an asset manager, and we get paid by managing assets as limited discretionary authority. You can also reach out to us at Cenacle Cap, CENACLE, CenacleCapital.com, and use the form handler on the website to reach out to us and send us a message. So either way, we'd love to have a conversation with people and continue the conversation.
There you go. Check them out over there, CenacleCapital.com. Give them a follow on the old Twitters as well, at Cenacle Capital, CENACLE, capital, all one word. Of course, kick the tires and light the fires over there at Genesis Volatility as well, gvol.io. They've got, of course, all things Deribit, so you get your Bitcoin options, you get your ETH options. They've added in new sources of data all the time. They continue to add new sources of data, which is how we're able to get that Solana data for you now. So check it out. There's more stuff popping in there all the time. gvol.io is the place to go. We got to get on out of here, but don't worry, listeners. Stay tuned to the network throughout the week for all the other great content coming at you. If you subscribed on your favorite podcast platform, it'll be hitting you there on demand as well. And, of course, back again next week, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's MIXLR.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/The Options Insider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.